10,000 Dawns, Chapter 19, Part 2, A Crystal Road. Video transcript. Centro Systems Military Commission's fund proposal. Image. We see Manuel Salazar. He is sitting in front of the camera at a desk made of an artisanal, genetically modified wood. He looks more prim than usual, wearing a dark blue blazer with red stenciling across the breasts, and a light blue shirt. We can't see his legs, so he could be wearing boxers and bunny slippers for all we know. Let's assume he is. Manuel. Good evening, members of the board. The question ahead of us at Centro Systems is one of the future of humanity. After all, as our disastrous campaign to retake the Rim showed, the threats and challenges Centro faces are ones that, through our previous assumptions about what constitutes adequate preparation under a train and then under another train. Image. We see several grisly images of the failed war on the Rim. People in Centro uniforms and armor who suffered death on the Rim colonies. Even though we've never been there ourselves, the backgrounds look different enough that the bodies look out of place. After all, if you make concrete out of naturally occurring materials on Europa, it'll probably look different than concrete on Earth. The sense of loneliness this dichotomy brings permeates the screen. Manuel. Even though we ended up taking Titania, the moon of Uranus, and annihilating the warlord to run it, the credibility of Centro's military is in question. Mars has already been seeking increased home rule, and the underground resistance here on Earth is increasing as well. Whether you like it or not, and whether you believe it or not. Image. We see a pair of women, Commodore Cornelia Carthage and her ground commander, Colonel Zhang Han, standing in front of a Centro flag during the Centro victory ceremony on Titania. Manuel sighs from off-screen. Not the version of him on-screen. Problem? Arch says. The video pauses. Well, we all know what happened with Zhang Han, don't we? Arch threw a question mark up on his face. No? So your knowledge of basic facts about the outside world isn't infinite. Zhang Han ended up taking an honorable discharge, and then dishonorably led and won the unlawful revolution on Mars. She ended up fighting her former commanding officer, Cornelia Carthage, during the conflict. It seems strange to Arch they could have served together so closely when they would be so far apart so soon afterwards. Had Zhang kept her aspirations from Carthage? Or did she know? Arch knew nothing about the two women. For all he knew, they hated each other. The lack of knowledge unnerved him. The video resumes. Image. We see B-roll footage of scientists and engineers hard at work. It looks less like a lab and more like what a lab looks like on TV. A scientist holds up a vial of transparent red liquid and examines it, swirling it gently for the camera. Manuel. The solution? A new step in the art of war. Too long have we relied on developing loyalty. Instead, we should simply create it. Right now, my scientists at Centro Systems Subsidiary Corporation, Nojpaten Inc., are hard at work on an idea that will put Centro back on top in terms of military might. We call it Project Anarabe. Arch leaned in. He didn't even realize he did. Image. We see a room full of people who look sort of like Archimedes, only their outer carapaces have been removed. They all face away from us. Their limbs are all cybernetic, machine parts and metal structure around which the exterior screens fit, complete with rows of holes where screws and bolts fit in. Their bare skin is free of pigment, and you can see veins and processes clearly through their engineered albinism. People in lab coats or overalls walk around them taking notes, testing mechanisms, or doing repairs. Manuel. What you see before you is the army of the future. An entire culture that will follow our orders through trust alone, secluded and paranoid of the outside world. We repurposed an old storage hub space station and transformed it into their home, Anarabe Station, a place where they think themselves totally alone in the universe. When insurrection occurs, be it on Mars, Venus, the Rim, or Earth itself, we will be able to deploy these units against them. No chance of insurrection, no chance of disobedience. We see the units going through training drills in unison. They're superbly skilled. The image changes. We see vats of torsos with heads growing in tanks. The first generation was speed-grown, built from a potpourri of the best genes we could find on Earth for our purposes, and a few specially made ones, implanted with similar but not identical sets of memories. As you can see, the arms and legs were stopped from growing using genetic blockers in order to save material, as the units will receive cybernetic limbs as well as organs as soon as they leave the tanks. Since the units will be completely covered, skin pigmentation is superfluous and was removed as well. Soon afterwards, they all woke up on their new home. Initial tests with this first generation were less than perfect, however. Image. We see Manuel standing next to some sort of Centro Army officer yelling commands. The soldiers follow the orders too well. If given a list of orders that contradict themselves or have an order that makes another order impossible, the group simply attempts to follow it, getting confused and injured in the process. Manuel. Memory implantation doesn't necessarily mean cognitive reasoning development. In skipping the group's development, we created a group of adults who had less problem-solving skills than children. While this works in a pinch, it wasn't optimal for a realistic combat scenario. So, we allowed the honorable units to procreate. Image. We see several masked and carapaced units. One of them is lovingly holding a baby. It's not subtle, as there are big red cartoon hearts on their carapace. They suddenly turn off. The baby starts crying, and several people in lab coats pry the baby out of its mother's arms. Naturally, this presented challenges. The offspring had to have their legs and many organs removed very quickly after birth to make sure their bodies accepted the new parts and incorporated them correctly. Image. The young children are being issued orders by the military officer again. They question when the orders are impossible to follow and come up with creative solutions to hard problems. The officer and Manuel look pleased. Manuel. The new children are proving to excel beyond our every expectation. Capable of creative and independent thought, yet also totally under the control of their programming. Creating a continual army of these units will allow Central military supremacy for decades to come. Image. We see Manuel again. He is smiling at us, his arms wide out. Arch felt a hand on his back. Manuel. Your funding for this project... The hand tried to reach for a panel on his back. Arch reached back, dropping his hand around the wrist and flinging the person over him to land with a smack on the floor. Manuel moaned on the ground as the large recorded version of him kept asking for money. It looked like his arm was broken, maybe more. Arch didn't let that hold himself back. He grabbed Manuel by the underarm and dragged him along the aisle of the theater as he screamed and yelled, "Please, listen! You don't understand the situation! I understand what you did to us! How you lied to us!" Manuel tried to grab on Arch's leg, but he just kicked him in the face, breaking his nose. Blood gushed out into the floor, leaving a red trail as he kept dragging him. Manuel trying to grab door frames, chairs, any handhold he could get, but Arch was just too strong. "Are you proud of what you did, Manuel Salazar?" Arch lifted him up, holding him a foot off the ground. Manuel struggled in vain. "I did what was necessary to save humanity. You've never been off the station. There are revolutionaries. People who want to take everything from me. People like you. I have nothing in common with you. You are an independent man." He smiled, a forced and bloody smile. "Out of all of the units, people, sure, out of all of the people here, you're the only one who's awake. You're special. There's something different about you. People like us, we're better than other people. It doesn't sound nice, but it's true." He hacked on his own blood for a moment. "We make possible what other people just wish for." "Do you know what I wish for?" "Anything you want." "Good. I want to see you suffocate." Manuel's eyes went wide. Archimedes, please." This station is shielded from outside signals, aside from your ship. You have 30 seconds to live before your little bomb trigger becomes as important as your frozen corpse. I have people A wife, grandchildren. You're not even my Manuel, but you're close enough. I'd be happy to kill every last one of you in these 10,000 dawns. Manuel looked at Arch like he'd gone crazy, for that Arch flung him into a wall. You enslaved me. You enslaved my family. You took our freedom. You took our bodies. You cut us up and secluded us to be your private army. But even though you tried, you couldn't take my thoughts. I'm right here, Manuel Salazar. Archimedes von Honorabe. Say my name. Manuel stared up at him, trying to get up off the floor, but he'd clearly broken many bones from the throw. Say it! Archimedes. Say the whole thing. Archimedes von Honorabe. Arch looked down at him. You're God's damn right. Thanks for announcing your executioner. Arch picked him up and carried him to the airlock. He was barely fighting anymore. Opening one hatch, he got in and closed it behind him. I'm magnetizing my feet to the floor, Manuel. So when I open that hatch, you'll blow out that hatch just like my family did. They didn't. Shut up! Arch reached for the button to open the door. He didn't touch it. Any last words? Manuel's brow furrowed as much as it could. No sprechen. Fitting. Arch reached back for the button. He breathed in. Come on. Manuel's eyes shifted to his hand. Have you ever killed anyone before, Archimedes? Arch's body turned on extra absorption as he began to sweat. This would be the first time. Manuel laughed. So, Archimedes, let's see how good of a soldier I made you. Finish your job. This program is dumb. It wasn't actually funny. You wouldn't laugh along if there was a laugh track. Graelyn didn't mind, though. Feeling her mother stroke her hair as her head lay on her lap was good enough. She had never felt this safe. The days had been flying by from her. Was this what she had missed? It was so hard to imagine that this could be real, that she could stay here, that the hell she'd grown up in was just that, a hell, and not the norm. She tensed for a moment and sat up, curling up in her blanket, suddenly spooked by her mother's touch. What if she hits me, she thought. She knew she wouldn't, but she still looked like the woman who did. Her body would be out of her control, her skin turning to pins and needles, and she'd grow distant. Are you okay? I'm fine, she said. The program finished, and with everyone else in bed, her mother decided to make them cocoa. Mom, Graelyn said, with her voice catching in her throat. Yes? Do you think people can change? Her mother stopped stirring the cup. Well, of course, I'm sure they can. I mean, do you think there are things about yourself that you can't change? Graelyn, you're a good person. You do well in school. You get along at home and church. She gulped back the knowledge. She still went to church here. She'd awkwardly attended with her family since she'd arrived, but she felt like she was lying the whole time she was there. But it made these people happy. Attending was part of the bargain of keeping them happy, she'd concluded. But what if I'm not? What if it's all an act? Her mom laughed and then caught herself. I'm sorry. I shouldn't be laughing. But being a good person is a choice. Let's say, deep down, you had the urge to be a serial killer. Mom, I'm not a serial killer. Hypothetically, what would be the right thing to do? Graelyn mulled it over. Turn yourself in for help. Get people to watch you. Or take yourself out of the equation. Put yourself in a cabin in the woods or a secret city in the mountains or something. Exactly. It may be hard, but you still have a choice. Her mother set a mug in front of her, and Graelyn sipped it. Are you sure that's right, though? No, I'm not a philosopher. I'm just Mom. Graelyn looked up at her, her glasses glinting off the kitchen lights. I don't want to leave, and you don't have to. This is your home. Graelyn smiled and sipped her cocoa. There was a knock on the door. Who on God's green earth could that be at this hour? The knock happened a second time. I'll get it, Graelyn said softly, and slid off the kitchen stool. She made her way to the door, her bare feet cold against the tiles, then warmer against the carpet that led to the door. She reached for the knob and turned it. Opening the door, she saw Archimedes, his carapace dirty and scratched. Arch, what are you doing here? She whispered. Who is it, dear? Just a friend. I'm sending them off. Graelyn, we need to go. Arch put his foot in the door. This isn't real. Of course it isn't real. Now go away. How did you get here anyways? It's a long story. Graelyn, they're trying to give you what you want. And they succeeded, so shoo. No, I'm not going to let you do this. He shoved the door open and grabbed her by the arm. Arch, let me go. He began to pull her out the door, and she stumbled down the path. She winced against his firm grip. No, I know what they want you to do here. I'm not going to let you kill your mother. Graelyn's eyes went wide. Arch, she whispered. Arch, what did you do? Archimedes von Anarabe was born in the inky sea of starlight, kept in by a thin wall of metal. He had lived under one set of presumptions his whole life, only for those ideas to be lies, and for those lies to be promises he made to himself. This moment, holding Manuel in an airlock, was a moment he dreamed of for years. His heart beat with rage, its metal, plastic, and ceramic parts working in tandem to increase his temper against the man who'd built him, who'd shut him up in this menagerie. Arch's feelings were his guide. Then he asked himself the question he'd asked ever since he was a child, staring out at the twinkling stars. Why am I here? It was a tired question, but today the question had a different meaning, a different purpose. He wanted to kill Manuel Salazar, to free his people, but it was too perfect. The programming in him shouldn't have been that easy to overcome. It had to have been modified to remove some of the internal blocks, but not all of them, before he came here. Just enough. He could do it himself. Manuel squirmed in his grip. This was a trap of his wildest dreams. He pressed the button to open the door back into the station, demagged his feet, and stepped back inside, gently carrying Manuel with him and setting him down coughing on the floor. Activate one of us who is a doctor. Only one. Give any other order than to have them heal you, and I'll snap your neck. Manuel nodded and called out a series of random words and one of the denizens of Anarabe's names. They carried him to a med center, and the doctor, Galenis, got to work. Here's how it's going to work. You're going to take all of us back to Earth and set my people up with a place to live. You're going to remove the programming from them as well. That's impossible. It's possible. The alternative is you lose your life. Manuel slowly nodded. Then we're going to go to Project Atlantis. Does that exist here? Manuel nodded quicker. Yes, he rasped. But it was a failure. The whole thing was closed off. Good. Then the city will be empty. I'll just put the units, my people, your people, there. Save time. Fine with me. Arch leaned back in his chair. You're getting a very good deal here. You activated Project Atlantis in another universe to come get me? Of course, it wasn't entirely that simple, but basically. Well, you wasted your time. Go home, Arch. No, if we don't go home, we can't save my people who are there. Don't you get it? They're slaves, Graelyn. Manuel Salazar thinks he owns them. You can do that without me. That's your business. This is mine. They want you to stay here, Graelyn. The people who tried to stop us traveling in the first place. The figure on the Bifrost. They're trying to trick you. Great. It worked. Go away. Arch reached for her. Don't you touch me. Graelyn, they want to make you their pawn. I want to disappear. We both lost our families, Arch. I can get mine back. I could have stayed with mine, too. Well, it's not my fault. You don't love them enough. How dare you? Yeah, I said it. Stop hoisting your problems on me. I'm just fine. Graelyn, don't you remember what Kinnan said? The mission we're on is important. It's not just us at stake here. If we fail, universes could turn to nothingness. There are trillions of lives at stake here, more than we can even understand. Versions of everyone we've ever loved. I don't love anyone, you nitwit. Love is just something people tell you so you stop fighting back. No one. She narrowed her eyes. No one. She thought of Mr. Sprinkles, Lizette, Alice, Arch. That can't be true. You need to get away from me, Archimedes. She could almost hear the gears turning literally inside of him. I can't do this on my own. I'm not as smart as you. I'm not as clever. I don't even understand the science of what's going on remotely. I'd be trapped without you. And I'm not your brawny waste of space. I can't even really operate the portal equipment. I just turned it on and threw slips of metal I'd carved with where I was into it till Kinnan came and did it for me. She threw up when she came through. It was making her sick just being where we are. I can't get help again. I need you. Your mental failings aren't my responsibility. We're the only ones who can go into the Prime Universe. We have a moral obligation. Oh, screw you! This is everything I've ever wanted. Right here. This will die with the rest of it. You will die. Good! Why are you acting like this? I thought we were friends. I don't have friends. I guess so. But I need you. He grabbed her by the arm and began pulling her down the sidewalk. I'll scream. Fine. You know I'm built to be a killing machine. She gritted her teeth. You can't take me away from here, Arch. You can't. Her voice started cracking. You don't know what it's like. How my mother was. I've only ever wanted this. Only this. Don't take this from me, please. Please, Arch. They haven't hit me or yelled at me or told me how worthless I am not was. Can't you understand that? I need this. You can't take this away from me. He didn't stop. She struggled against him. She tried to dig her bare feet into the pavement, but it didn't work. I'm not gonna let trillions of people die so you can be with your mother. Please. No. Please. No. Possum Sinestro Victor Beta Fish! Graelyn yelled. Arch stopped. She looked at him, moving her head back and forth, and slipped her hand out of his grip. Unit Archimedes. Delete all references to person, Graelyn Scythes. Then continue with your mission into the Prime Universe. There was a silence. She rubbed her wrist. Arch was completely still. Well, come on then. It shouldn't take you that long to delete me. Get on with it. How did you know that code? He whispered. She looked at him, searching his faceplate for an emotion she couldn't find. She clasped her hands, taking a step back. I saw it when I accidentally looked in your brain when I found you. And you kept that from me. I need insurance you wouldn't hurt me. You lied to me. It's what I do. Who the hell are you? I don't even know you, do I? She straightened her spine and looked him right in the eye. No, you don't. I never thought you could be so cruel. You thought my whole seclusion thing was an act? Arch, I scare myself. I only know how to treat people how I was treated. No, you don't. You helped those people in the cages. You saved me from Ares with that gravity manipulator. You saved Alice and Manuel on the roof in Nojpaten. She didn't meet his gaze anymore and found a nice plant to look at. Statistical anomalies in my overall behavior. You were so good to Lizette. You taught her piano nearly every day. Stop it. She closed her eyes. Stop telling you you're not the monster you've convinced yourself you are. It's a cycle, Arch. I can't be better than it. I can't fight it. I just have to run from it. I don't deserve people, and people deserve better than me. A dog barked in someone's yard. Graelyn crossed her arms. It was chilly outside, and she was, after all, just in her PJs. I'm sorry I grabbed you, Arch said. I'm sorry I took information from your head without asking, called you horrible things, and insulted you. He nodded. I won't make you leave. She nodded and looked up at the moon. You see that, Arch? Earth's moon? Yeah. When I was a kid, we took a school trip up there one day. I spent the whole time doing homework, for the most part. When I got back, my mom was still angry I hadn't worked enough during the time I'd spent on it. She sighed. Sometimes I say something or I do something and I just feel like I'm gonna be her. You know? He didn't know, but nodded anyway. When I got to this place, how could I let it go? I felt like maybe if I stayed here, I could wipe away the poison inside myself. You're not poison. I don't deserve anyone. Yes, you do. His family will lose me when I leave, Arch. I'm dead in this universe. I'm sorry. If I go, we need to find another one of me. One without a family and put them here. You have to promise me that. I promise. She tried to hold in her tears. You're right. Trillions of lives. Trillions and trillions of lives. I'm not going to be that selfish. I'm glad. But we both know I almost was. Wanting a family isn't selfish. She kept staring up at the moon and thought of the crystal orb over the beach world. Have you thought of the kind of cruelty this takes? To give us our wildest dreams and to have to give them up to save others. What kind of psycho does that? What kind of monster? You couldn't do that. She wanted to argue, but she knew he was right. Thanks. You're allowed to be selfish. You're allowed to want a better life than you had, but that time has passed. She nodded. If I want to be a good person, the kind of person I should be, I can't cross certain lines. This is one of them, I guess. If I want to be even a fraction as good as the real me, haven't you wondered what we'll be like in the real universe? I bet I'm a great scientist saving tons of lives. I don't know who I'd be. She walked up to him and put her hand on his arm. You're the man who didn't kill anyone, even the person you swore to kill. And you're the woman who let go of a perfect family to save a universe. Then come on, Arch. Let's go save people. I'll pack my bags. And you said you didn't care. I'm a bad liar, okay? She smiled as she said it, walking back to the house as the moon glowed brightly. Kinnan Jans was sweating hard. This place was too close to the Prime Universe, and she was feeling it. Where were they? Arch shouldn't be taking that long. At least all the Anarabe citizens Arch had transplanted here were staying out of her way. A moment later, the portal began swirling faster, and Graelyn and Arch popped out of it. Graelyn, dressed to the nines in a nice skirt suit. Nice clothes. No troubles? No, Graelyn said. Arch looked down at her. Okay, yes. Figured. Kinnan spat and began typing in new controls. Her eyes were sunken, her skin pale and sickly. Kinnan, are you okay? Can't stay here long. I've set the machine to hop you back on the beach world. No, put us on the crystal moon thingy, Graelyn said. I need to know what it is. Kinnan's eyes went wide. Did you say crystal moon? Yes? That's a factory of crystal. That's a powerful piece of technology. They make the Bifrost and the Labyrinth. Without them, we'd go insane trying to traverse the gap between universes. Many have. Graelyn tried to take that sentence all in. There were a lot of how questions on her brain, but Kinnan looked like she could barely stand. So we shouldn't go to it? No, you absolutely should. Kinnan began to work the controls again. She took off her coat and rolled up her sleeves, revealing a series of circles on her arm. Each like a bullseye had been banded over and over again on a line on her forearms. This machine is awful. It's like using a bulldozer to turn a doorknob, she muttered. Will the moon help? If you can get control of it, your mission will be easy, she finished and wiped her brow. Now go. I can't stay here much longer, but I have something for you. Info the Vice family dug up for you. Kinnan reached into a pocket and handed Graelyn a thumb drive. This should help you when you reach Triton. Graelyn nodded and slid it into her pocket. Whatever was on it, hopefully it helped. She looked at Arch. Right, let's. He nodded. She held out her hand, hesitantly at first. He took it, and she squeezed his hand. I lied. Friends. Go! Kinnan shouted, and they jumped through. Graelyn's feet touched down on a plane of glowing crystal, blue and lined with thin fractures, and she heard Arch clomp down next to her. As far as they could see was crystal. It rolled flat and up into hills and down into valleys. Large titans of the same material lumbered the landscape, 30 feet tall and hunched over, their arms nearly dragging on the ground as they lumbered, their headless torsos glowing with an internal light. A few 100 meters away was a towering spire, twisting up to the heavens. Below their feet, light seeped up from the moon's center. It glowed gently, lighting up the bottoms of their faces. All of this had been built, she realized. None of it was organic. A civilization existed that could make a whole moon out of crystal. A civilization existed that could make many of them, and leave one here for some reason. As she stepped forward again, the portal closing behind them, it looked like the bottom of her foot was glowing from the light coming up at it. She smiled at Arch, and then, being unable to see his face, hid her own behind her hands. I'm sorry, she said. He carefully stepped toward her. Can I hug you? She nodded, her face still hidden. He wrapped his arms around her. We were both assholes today. I was worse. You always blame yourself, Graelyn. People make mistakes. I forgive you. You shouldn't have to. That's stupid. No one's perfect. Do you forgive me? She nodded into his chest. 'Cause if you don't, that's okay. No, I do. She took her hands off her face and wrapped her arms around him, too. I just mess everything up. Liar. Tin Man. Graelyn. That's not an insult. I'm bad at this game. She laughed. Let's go. The tower awaits. She held out her hand again, and he took it. Together, they walked toward the tower, the world alight around them. The tower had a door, like many towers do, but this one had no knob or handle. Arch had to drag it open, carefully rolling it into the wall. It was apparently secretly a circle, and they entered it. On the base floor of the tower was a pool of what was almost water, but was not water. It was thicker, but still clear. Without touching it, Graelyn guessed it had the consistency of spit. In the center of the pool was a chair. No, a throne, but not a throne for a king. The chair was wide and tall, and on it were all sorts of tubes and wires and rods coming out of it all over, which all led into a person. That person was wearing a skin-tight bodysuit that left the head, hands, and feet exposed. That person was a she, and she was a Graelyn. This Graelyn had a helmet on, covering her eyes, ears, and nose. In her throat was a feeding tube. The Graelyn and Arch, who had just entered, could only gawk. What the hell is this? Graelyn said. Arch looked behind them, as if this was a trap about to be sprung on them. It's like she's feeding into the tower. Or the moon. Graelyn picked up a piece of stray crystal on the ground and threw it into the pool. It plopped in harmlessly. Throwing caution to the wind, she took off her shoes and dipped her foot into the liquid. She was right. It had the consistency of spit. Looking back, Arch took it as the signal to follow her, and they sloshed through the pool to the woman at the center. Graelyn and Arch called to her, yelled at her, but she sat silently. What should we do? We don't know what these cords all do, Arch asked. Then let's get the ones around her head first. Maybe she will. Good idea. They carefully began to lift off the helmet, pulling out the tubes and pulling off sensors that hung down from it as they did. They gently set the helmet on the back of the chair and waited. Slowly, ever so slowly, her eyes opened. Hello? The chair Graelyn whispered. Hi, we're here to rescue you, she said to herself. She tried to focus on them. I'm still dreaming, she said. No, you're awake. What are you doing in that chair, do you know? Chair Graelyn looked back at her like it was an odd question. I'm the moon. You mean you control the moon? Arch asked. I suppose, she replied meekly. Is it safe to take these tubes out of you? Chair Graelyn nodded. The moon can keep running for a while with me out of it, but I'll need to come back or we'll fall from the sky. Okay, well that wasn't good. Carefully, they removed the rest of the tubes and wires, our Graelyn taking care of some of the more personal ones as Arch left the room, and they lifted her out of the chair, carrying her to the crystal plane outside the tower. Looking at each other, the Graelyns didn't speak, but silently held hands, as the one in the chair first looked out at the world with her own eyes and then began to sob. She leaned in and held herself, a confusing moment, to be sure, stroking her own head gently. In time, the Graelyn from the chair was ready to talk. How on earth did you get here? We had a machine that opened up portals to other realities. She nodded. I knew you were coming. They told me. I thought you'd be more surprised to see yourself, Arch added. She shrugged. It was a moon. It changes your perspective. Chair Graelyn began to roll up the sleeves of her bodysuit, and our Graelyn saw a row of circles like bullseyes on her skin where the tubes had gone in, just like the ones Kinnan had. Why did they choose you to run a moon? That seems like something they'd want someone they could trust for. I'm not so much in control as like a processor. They give me orders through my mind. Could you control it, though? Chair Graelyn squinted. Our Graelyn realized she didn't have her glasses, so she pulled out the pair of prescription sunglasses she'd gotten for the beach and handed them to her. It was probably really bright anyways. She put them on and reacted to the sudden clarity. Oh, I forgot what seeing looked like. It's darker than I remember. They're sunglasses. Oh, right. She rubbed her head. My head is so empty without their voices in there. You're free. You don't have to go back. No, the moon will fall into the ocean if I don't, our Graelyn thought. This was her. This was Graelyn. This was a Graelyn who had been through things she couldn't even imagine. But Arch could. She gestured at him by tilting her head. He tilted his head back in confusion, so she tilted her head back at Chair Graelyn, and he got it. Hey, do you know who I am? She shook her head. Big cyborg guy? Well, yes, but I'm a friend of yours from another dimension. Not mine. True, but I care. We're here to help. I know what it's like having people be able to make you do things without your control. Change your thoughts. It's horrible, isn't it? She nodded, pulling at her hair. But we have a way to free you. No one can stand up to them. You don't understand their wonder and atrocity. They can create moons. They can pull you out of your own history. Dawn can, our Graelyn cut in. Do you see the marks on your arms? We work for a group of people led by a woman with those same marks. She owns a whole plane of reality. She has an army, and she sent us here to help save you. Arch gave her a look like, you are stretching the truth, but she didn't stop. Dawn is all about saving people. Saving as many people as we can, and we're going to save you. You can't stop them. They're infinite. They're scared enough that they left a moon here to guard their back door. What was the moon doing here? Chair Graelyn thought hard. We were sealing the exit, but we found a meteor on the ground, an orb that let us through. Was that you? They didn't notice, so you can resist them. Only barely. When they are looking away? But you know how the machine you're hooked up to works, she nodded. I am the moon. Then you know which chords feed you their commands. Her eyes grew wide behind the sunglasses. It's amazing how simple things don't occur to you when people go out of the way to make sure that they don't. Weaning your mind away from them, turning you to the ideas they want. Chair Graelyn's mind had opened up. I could be the moon. Like, just me as the moon. That is me. Yes, R. Graelyn responded. Chair Graelyn tried to rise but stumbled. She'd been in the chair so long her muscles had atrophied quite a bit. One of her arms around each of her shoulders, they carefully helped her back to the chair. Which cords are necessary? Arch asked, picking up a handful. Not as many as you'd think. Most of them are for maintaining my body and feeding information back and forth from the council. She directed them to which cords took her back into, and she leaned back in the chair, her eyes doing the same in her head. She kept the sunglasses on. Where do you need to go? Chair Graelyn said. The Prime Universe. The so-called real one. It's on the other side of the labyrinth, behind the facade here. I think I know how to make an entrance, she said, a smile creeping onto her face. Hold on. The figure at the desk was old. Older than it's easy to comprehend. In fact, it was so old that trying to put a label on how old it was, for our own pathetic minds, fairly pointless. You know those turtles that live for centuries? Pfft, chump change. Trees that are thousands of years old? Wimps. This was a being so old it didn't keep track of age anymore. It had simply gotten over that. The funny thing about getting that old, though, is that while you certainly get more and more knowledge, you still have the same physical capabilities of your species. I bet you can live really long, but that doesn't mean you can make your will into existence with a snap. Perhaps a pen stroke, but not a snap. So imagine the figure at the desk. It is filling in something in its book. The things it writes look three-dimensional on the page. When it finishes the character starts moving. Sometimes adjust its place on the page. This is normal for the figure, as is having a desk at the end of a crystal road called the Bifrost in a place called the Labyrinth. This is nothing special. However, the day got quite a bit more unique several seconds later. As the being was beginning another line on the page, there was a rumbling, and then the black wall of the sky tore open, and a great shining object rammed through the barrier between a reality and the labyrinth, ripping through illusion and substance, sending them flying down through the unending void. The being covers its hooded visage. It's so bright! What is it, some kind of battle station? No, that's not it, That's no battle station, the figure says. That's a moon! Jumping out from the unending shadow is a bright, glowing blue ball, fairly cheerful, bits of darkness collapsing around it. Hello there. My name is Graelyn Size. Put down your pen and surrender, or by God, we will use the full capabilities of this moon on you. It was fairly certain they didn't know what the full capabilities were, but even so, it dropped its pen. Hands up! It followed orders. The moon flew into the labyrinth and began maneuvering down so that the bulk of it was below the Bifrost. Then it steered towards the road so that the top of a tall tower was lined up with the being's desk. 30 seconds passed, and 3 figures popped out of a hole on the top, clearly propelled by an internal gravity manipulator. 2 of the 3 looked rather surprised at the travel device. Arch's lack of a face didn't deter the being, and then landed gently on the tower roof. Surprised to see us back, I bet, one of the 2 Graelyns said, the one who was wearing a skirt. Yes, the being said back. It said yes back in every language, and yet none. Maybe it hadn't spoken at all. You're taking us into the Prime Universe or showing us how to get there. The being lowered its arms. Look, I understand you don't live very long, but this is a very hasty idea. Explain why. We've sealed off the Prime reality for a reason. Our people have a truce with the Council now. The Prime reality has already fallen in the future. There was silence. What? I mean, there's no point going in there. Your leader doesn't understand what's going on. You are with Dawn, right? The woman, clearly tired of people from other dimensions, trying to explain things to her side. Sorta. I mean, yes, but look, that's why we're going in. Kinnan is letting her vendetta against the Council get the better of her. They've already won, and their story will spread into every one of the 10,000 dawns. The woman looked aghast. So you're just surrendering? Who are you guys anyway? The figure scratched its head. We're the last fixture of reality, the firmament that holds 10,000 dawns in place, the final bastion of sanity against the void, the chaos, the darkness, the Shadrach. We are the firmament in the sky you never see. The two Graelyns looked at each other, rolling their eyes. That means nothing. The figure made a broad, sweeping gesture with its arms. It doesn't matter that the council has won because we are eternal. Oh my God, shut up and explain yourself. It might be too much for your tiny minds. Both of the Graelyns stormed off the tower and getting right up to the figure's personal space, crossed their arms, staring the being down till it flinched. Okay, look. So Weird Task is a society with keeping the universes, space, time, causality, all of that together. We'd already evolved and built time travel while you were still protozoa. We keep track of everything. So, you're an empire? Arch added from the back. No, not at all. More like the city services. You don't think that everything in the universe would just keep running without someone nudging it in the right direction every now and then, do you? The Graelyns looked at each other. Yes? Well, yes, technically. But there are always people messing it up. Like the council, Arch shouted from the back again. Well, again, yes, but we're tired of trying to deal with them. They want to rule 10,000 universes? Have at it. They'll be the real ones suffering with all the paperwork they'll have. They're murdering people, one Graelyn said. Kidnapping people, the other said. You can always get more people. The two Graelyns, angry, pounced on the figure and pulled its hood back. At first, it was like seeing static. Then a woman's face appeared. They looked surprised. No, she said. Static. A man's face. Better? They were dumbfounded. The being sighed. Humans. People matter, and our stories matter, so you're taking us into the Prime Universe. Now. It rubbed its new head awkwardly. It's sealed? I got there before, and... Wait! Kinnan said there was a rule. You couldn't go to a reality you hadn't been to before, but wording, the being said. These portals are built between realities that way, so you need a shepherd to take you across the labyrinth as a safeguard to prevent anyone who wasn't us using it willy-nilly. We didn't expect someone like Kinnan to be able to take advantage of that system and let tiny people like you through with her, so the labyrinth accepts you. But that's not the only way to travel. If you tear through, cut through, you can go anywhere. It's just dangerous and hard to aim and drives you insane and damages the fabric of the universe. The council keeps doing it. Frankly, it's an environmental catastrophe. That's how we started exploring when we were primitives. Built the labyrinth in the first place. Wait. So Project Atlantis does that? Tears open realities? Hence why both us and your Dawn are trying to stop those from opening, for different reasons, and generally they hate us. Hey, but we overlap on that point. Although apparently Kinnan is willing to break that rule today. The fool. You're taking us to a Project Atlantis, and you're going to help us tear a big gaping hole in the prime reality, Chair Graelyn said. Honestly, it just has to fit through Arch and I. You're going to help us tear through a small and reasonably sized hole into the prime reality. I really can't. This goes against, everything I stand for. You think you're better than us, don't you? Our Graelyn spat. You're a big fish, and we're just plankton. That hardly gives me enough credit, it muttered. But sure. She grabbed him by the collar. You played with me today. Do you know what you did? My life may be tiny, but you gave me the one thing that mattered, and I had to take it away from myself. Do you know how that felt? How that hurt? Can you imagine how I feel? What kind of person could be so cruel, so casually? You didn't have to leave. She let him go. Of course I did. I'm not a monster. She took a step back. Open the portal. I'll go first. The figure gulped and gestured to a star, which accelerated towards them. and then stopped as a circular pool of white light. Oh, I can't leave my moon here, Chair Graelyn said anxiously. It's my moon. You can just collapse the matter, the figure said as though this was obvious. Chair Graelyn cocked her head to the side and then touched it and focused. Suddenly, the moon shrunk into a tennis ball-sized crystal orb. Our Graelyn yelled, "That's impossible! You can't just compress matter like that. Even if you could, it would still weigh as much as a moon." She pointed and gestured wildly. The moon's internal gravitic compensators of time taking most of the weight off, and much of the mass has been flushed into a temporary pocket universe, made just for that purpose. Graelyn threw her hands up in the air and walked towards the portal, cursing. As she did, the figure touched one character on his book, and then Arch began to nudge him towards the portal. One by one, the four of them made their way into Project Atlantis, a different one than they'd been in earlier that day, arriving just outside the building, inside the structure that housed John Errol's machine. Ushering the being along with them, they entered in, to find the machine dusty and out of use. Together, they worked to hook it back up, and soon enough they had a spiraling gyroscope of light. "So, do we just step through?" The being was silent. "We don't step through, do we? You'll need to cut a hole through this reality into the edge of the labyrinth, and then, well, ram it." "Ram it?" Arch said. "With what?" Chair Graelyn looked around them. "Why not this place?" Let me get if I'm saying this right to myself. You're saying we fly this underwater city somehow through a tear we cut in reality into another reality. Yeah, I flew a moon. I think you can manage the city. Would that work? Arch asked the figure, who promptly changed into a woman and started to try to look inconspicuous. When this didn't work, it began to look like a lizard person. Then a fish person. "It'll work," Graelyn said, and went over to a few consoles, pulling levers and checking dials. It shouldn't work, but she's right, it will work. She looked around the room. "Which just leaves what we do with you, I guess." Chair Graelyn pointed at herself. "Yes, you, me. Oh, you don't have to worry about me." She tried to give a dismissive gesture. "Yes, we do." "What were you doing before they installed you in the moon?" I was an orphan living on the streets. So you have no home to go back to?" She shook her head. Graelyn's hand shivered, and she walked over to the figure, stepping over old cords and machinery, the hum of the gyroscope ever present. "Can you make a portal to the house you put me in?" "I'm not." "You are. She has no home. Give her one. That family lost a daughter. Now, technically twice. You can heal a lot of hearts. That home was meant for you, and now it's for her." Chair Graelyn took off her sunglasses. Her jaw trembled. You mean I'll have a family?" Our Graelyn nodded. Chair rushed to her and wrapped her arms around her again, kissing herself on the cheek. I won't forget this." She squeezed her back, glad she couldn't see the pain on her own face. "You deserve it." The figure made a portal for her, and giving Arch a hug, then both a wave, and the figure a middle finger, she jumped through the portal. As the light faded, a slow applause came from the doorway to the building. Touching. There entered the same figure Graelyn remembered from the day her first portal opened, dressed in the same sort of robes the figure was, followed by Ares, the Anarabe unit like Arch, who kept his carapace totally dark. He opened his arms wide. Ares had a sword out. "I see you managed to get this far down the Crystal Road. But this is the end of it, I'm afraid. I'm impressed. You even managed to intimidate one of us." "I thought better of you, you know." The fish person gave an awkward shrug from the back of the room and turned into a woman who was also part cat. "But this is about us. You're not going into the Prime Universe. They've won. Get over it." Arch's feet clanged on the floor as he walked towards them. His coat billowed in the recirculated air. "I've learned a lot of stuff recently. Most of it, honestly, I don't really understand. But I know enough about you now to know one thing." The man crossed his arms. Ares raised his sword. "What? You won't see this coming." The 5 figures faced off against each other. Arch and Ares narrowed their visual apertures. Graelyn crossed her arms like the man. The Catwoman, who was now also a man again, tried to look inconspicuous. They stood. They stared. Glares were exchanged. Time passed. Nothing at all happened whatsoever. Eventually, the man uncrossed his arms and threw his hands up. What exactly was supposed to happen? Oh, nothing, Arch said. We just needed you to wait for the systems to finish coming online. Graelyn laughed as with a huge lurch, the main mushroom of Project Atlantis detached itself from the ocean floor and began to rise up through the waters of the ocean. Ares and the 2 men... No, wait, the one who came in with Ares is now a woman, and the other wasn't either gender, scampered as the whole thing rose up, rocketing higher and higher from the ocean floor. This might seem impossible, and technically it was, but Graelyn had seen that the energy that created the portals could be used to move an object, i.e. a moon. Putting this principle into practice, she directed the machine to not create a portal, but instead to provide upward thrust to the bottom of the mushroom. As the mushroom climbed into the sky, Graelyn would have to work quickly to put the second part of her plan into motion. What the hell are you doing? One of the figures said. They'd lost track of which one was which now. Ares ran at Arch, who unsheathed his sword, and the 2 crossed blades while Graelyn scampered along the controls. One of the figures began to get close to her, so she grabbed a crowbar off the ground and hurled it in their general direction. Badly. It didn't get close to hitting, but they ducked. That gave her all the time she needed. Arch had gotten better since his last encounter with Ares, and Ares seemed caught off guard by it. He swept the legs out from under Ares as he blocked one of the man's blows, and then dropped on his chest, elbow first, the impact making a cracking sound. Graelyn ran, pulling levers, adjusting dials. She had one shot at this. As the mushroom reached the height of its ascent and began to fall, she reached the last lever she needed and pulled it. From the gyroscope, down out of the bottom of the base, shot a swirling blue portal, a huge one. No one inside the mushroom actually saw this, so until they hit it, Graelyn was just hoping and praying. What I did, sir or madame, is win. I'm Graelyn Scythes, she yelled across the rim, and don't you forget it! The mushroom impacted the portal violently. It tore itself apart, its superstructure crumbling in on itself, support beams and offices being whisked away by the forces of the tear's swirling chaos. But it went through it. You might want to get out of here, she continued to yell, but they already were, scampering for the doors, running at top speed, Ares clutching his chest. One of them hastily made a portal, and the 3 disappeared. Graelyn smiled at Arch as they rocked and tumbled around the room. They couldn't see it, but they tore through the labyrinth, ripping reality asunder, the mushroom a multi-million-dollar battering ram against the sealed portal. There was a breaking sound, a smashing snap that echoed and pounded as the nature of the universe was ripped open and the mushroom fell in, losing bits of itself with every second. You enjoyed that a bit too much! They had it coming! True! The station seemed to flip, and Graelyn clutched a bolted-down console as Arch magnetized his feet. Graelyn, I just thought of something. What? We're coming out in space, right? Yeah? What if the station isn't airtight? She would have made a shocked expression if she wasn't being thrown around like a rag doll. I can't move! Arch nodded and clomped out of the building, stumbling as the station spun, finding the suits and bringing her one. She messily putting it on, thanking him profusely and biting her tongue a few times as the station shook. This is going to be a messy landing, she said through the suit's comm. As she sealed the helmet, they broke through. Most of the mushroom was gone, in fact, nearly all of it. As the last bits tore off, a single building, complete with the surrounding flat expanse of concrete around it, floated down gently through space until it crashed inelegantly on Triton, the moon of Neptune. Finally, it was all over. They were here, in the Prime Universe. The station was dark. The station was silent. Nothing moved on the moon, but they were there. Imagine you took your first look at truth. Let's use the most tired example in philosophy by Plato. Imagine you were in a cave, shackled so you could only look at a wall. Shadows of objects moving behind you appear on the wall, projected by a fire behind you. You give names to those objects turned shadows, and that is your world. One day, you are let out of the cave, your shackles broken. You see the world outside of it, no longer shadows but whole. Plato is probably there yelling at the narrator about misusing his story.
Ignoring Plato, you take in the world, and the world you saw before was a pale imitation, a mere shadow of what it really could be. The shapes are more real, more formed. Now imagine you look down at your hands, and you see yourself are made of shadows. You are just as much a lie as the scatterings on the wall. You were them all along. Imagine you are Graelyn Scythes, staring out at an empty waste on Triton, your breath catching in the refiltered air of your suit. There is nothing, and what there is means somehow more than the most meaningful moments of your life. A piece of sand holds more weight than the shadow of a mountain. Now imagine you look down at your hand, and you are that shadow on the wall. I imagine you'd scream. Not that it matters, for there is only silence amidst the shadows. Chair Graelyn, no longer in a chair, sat on the roof of her new home. It had taken some odd lying to get through the whole situation. Now she had a room, and a cat, and family. Sitting on the roof of her house, finally in real warm clothes, she stared up at the moon. Technically, she still had one in her pocket. She smiled at the shining white disk. "Hey, you," she called up to it. "I guess we have a lot in common."